Excellent. So now we will start the program. I'm going to introduce you to these three amazing authors we're hosting. So Tracy Dobmeier and Wendy Katzman have been great friends for over 20 years. Their friendship has sustained them through the ups and downs of raising kids, juggling careers, and creating new family traditions like Zoom meetings, for example. Family Zooms. We were just talking about that in the green room. So Girls with Bright Futures is their debut novel, and it is a dark, suspenseful journey into the cutthroat world of college admissions. Between the two of them, they have undergrad degrees from Princeton and from University of Michigan, a law degree from UC Berkeley, careers in marketing, nonprofit leadership, biotech law, 2 husbands, and 4 kids. 3 of whom have survived the college admissions process without a single parent landing in jail. There's still time, though. There's still time.
There's one more kid.
They will be in conversation with the great Amy Poeppel, the author of the novels Musical Chairs, Small Admissions, and Limelight. Side note, in Small Admissions, a young woman is unexpectedly thrust into the cutthroat world of New York City private school admissions. So this is very apropos. This is a very opportune meeting. Amy's writing has also appeared in the New York Times, Lit Hub, The Rumpus, Belladonna Comedy, and Working Mother. She and her husband have 3 sons and split their time between Kent, Connecticut, New York City, and Frankfurt, Germany.
Yeah.
That is cool. I would love to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair someday. So before I leave the screen, please do remember that we have the Facebook comments open for you. So you can put questions in there for any of the authors. And after they have their conversation, I'll come back in with your questions. And so without further ado, here are Tracy Dobmeier and Wendy Katzman with Amy Poeppel.
Great.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Well, I want to say yes, thank you to Amanda and to Warwick's for hosting this event. We love our independent bookstores, and everyone watching, you will love this book. So definitely it's a great win-win, because you can call Warwick's and order your copy and you'll get a great read. And you'll also have the wonderful benefit of supporting a truly great independent store. So I just want to start by congratulating both of you on the success of your debut novel. I really liked the fact that Publishers Weekly, which gave it a starred review, which is amazing, called it a morality tale for our times, which I think is really kind of the perfect line for this book. So I just wanted to start by sort of asking you to tell the audience a little bit about the content of the book itself, the topic of college admissions, parents and very stressed out students and their very stressed out parents, and what sort of inspired you to tackle this topic when you decided to join forces and write a book together.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you to Warwick's and to Amy for being here with us today, and to everybody who's watching. We're really excited to be here. Why don't we start with a short overview of the book,
right?
And then we can give background on like why we decided to write about college admissions.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, Girls with Bright Futures is the story of 3 prep school mothers in Seattle whose daughters are locked in competition for a single spot at Stanford.
Okay, so we've got the wealthy tech CEO mom. Her daughter is a mediocre student. Her personal assistant, whose daughter is the superstar student at our imaginary school, and a PTA mom whose daughter is a double legacy at Stanford.
Right, so that sets up, and it's about 3 weeks before early applications are due, and one of the girls is badly injured in an apparent hit and run. And the fallout from this incident rocks this privileged community until you really can't help but wonder if there's any line these families wouldn't cross to ensure their daughters' futures.
So it's suspenseful, but also with a side of satire that explores the college industrial complex, income inequality, and elite entitlement. Okay, so why did we decide to write about college admissions? So how about I'll start that one. Sure.
We're always negotiating here.
While you're figuring that out, I'll jump in with one quick comment because you know I adored this book. And what you just said is so interesting because I do think you succeeded in truly having moments in this book that are quite humorous, that are quite funny. And I'd love to share what some of those were for me in a minute, but it's also really devastating at times. I mean, you really managed to sort of take the reader on quite a journey in this book. So I just wanted to compliment you on managing to get a real range of emotions into a book, which I don't think is always that easy to do. So yes, I mean, in terms of getting that range of emotion into this particular book, how did this come about? How did you guys end up deciding on this topic?
So when our boys, our older boys, were in their high school years in the college admissions pipeline, each of our families experienced a pretty terrifying family health crisis. And everybody's okay, but it was that juxtaposition of the health crisis versus the college insanity that we were seeing around us that was the spark. Because we really wanted to make sense of, it just kind of changed our perspective on things. And we wanted to understand, why was college admissions what was it doing to our kids, our families, our communities, our friendships?
Right.
That was a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, we actually, when we first started talking about writing a book together, we had talked about writing a nonfiction book because I'm a lawyer by training. Wendy was a marketing executive with a thriving career at the time, which basically when we decided to do this, she set her career aside and
I started a new one.
Well, yes, that one career, and we started a new one together, which was, you know, kind of amazing.
This is bold. That's a bold thing to do.
Yeah.
I always joke it's because the one thing missing from her life was more time with me.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that must have been a pretty scary moment when you sort of took that leap. Exciting, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's funny that there wasn't an actual moment. It was suddenly, you know, you're going through life and you reach a certain age where you're good at something and you've done it for a really long time, but maybe you're not fully awake. And I think that health crisis in our family was a jolt. And then also just this idea, we embarked on this and it was so exhilarating to be learning something new, to be taking this big risk. It was just, I felt very alive.
Right, and it also was the kind of thing that we had preached to our own kids, right? Like, take chances, it's okay to fail. It's, you know, like approach life with a growth mindset, which is from this book that I read years ago when my kids were younger. It was by Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford psychologist, and it's called Mindset. And it actually was kind of a life-changing book in the way I parented, which was to just encourage, like, it's all about the journey and striving and taking on challenge, and not about whether you achieve certain objectives, right?
Right.
We realized, you know, we were in our late 40s, and we were afraid to try something totally different, and afraid that we might look foolish if we told everyone in our lives that we were doing this crazy thing and then we failed, right? So we had to really, it took a while, and it took both of us, I think, supporting each other, encouraging each other, and laughing a lot along the way to take this risk.
Keeping your sense of humor, which I think gets so lost on parents who are going through this process. And I think one of the things that was so perfect in this book is there's a moment where, and this is, I won't spoil anything, but there's just a moment where a bunch of kids are texting each other. They have a group text. And it is so fun because there happens to be a parent who is the one who's reading these group texts, but you really get an insight into the way the kids are handling all of this stress. And one of the moments that I thought was so perfect is this idea. It kind of goes back to, like, you know, you want your kids to sort of dream big, but you also don't want to put your dreams on your kids and sort of set you, like, if they're going to have failures in life, that's one thing, right? But to go out and buy all the insignia sweatshirts to a specific school, and and then one of the kids in the book finds a closet full of sweatshirts with one specific school's insignia on them. And she says to her friends, not just like, oh my gosh, the pressure, but she's sort of like, and I'm not even going to get in, lol. You know, like, and you really, I have to say, you captured the kids' voices so well. Did you like get teenage help when you were writing or are you just that tuned into kids that you just know how they?
Oh, we're so
yeah. Yeah. No, we did get help. We had we have nieces and nephews and kids and friends of kids, and so we definitely would ask questions. We would send silly emails to kids saying like, what's a slang word for X?
Yeah,
or right, because we weren't that tuned in.
Right. I mean, I'll just bring this up. This is a funny thing because we write about mothers and daughters, but our the 3 boys who we've sent off to college are boys. And so people have said, well, why didn't you make this about boys? Why is it mothers and daughters? And so part of it is because if you parented a teenage boy, like there wouldn't be a lot of dialogue and we would have had trouble filling 100,000 words.
Unless you count grunt as a word, right?
Yeah,
So,
they're a little less communicative, I think.
A little.
Or at least that's rumor has it. I don't have one, so I don't know. I only have boys. But yes, I find my nieces are a little more forthcoming with some of the more personal things. The boys are a little less.
Right.
Let me ask you this: if parents were to are to read this book, is there anything that you sort of hope they'll walk away with? Like, is there any lesson you hope they'll learn? And by the way, this is an interesting question for families going into the college admission season, but it's also for small admissions was about middle school kids. I mean, 8th graders are starting to get this pressure, right? They're already hearing that high school is all about college admissions, which is terrible, right? I mean, high school should be about a lot of things, and one small thing should be college admissions. So what would you want families to sort of learn, or at least what would you want them to think about?
I think I would say that we would hope that it's a cautionary tale about what happens when you let your ego take over a process that really should be about your children. And we hope that it would not be considered a blueprint for how to act.
To get your kids into your dream school. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely a cautionary tale. But what's interesting is there's such a really nice wide array of parents. I mean, you sort of see a lot of different kinds of parenting. So it's a cautionary tale, but some of the kids behave in ways that I think are so mature and more mature than the parents in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. Somewhere, I think it's around halfway through the book, I think it's Brian who's sort of sums it all up when he says, this whole Stanford thing has gotten totally out of hand. By the time I got to that line, I just laughed because it was like, you think? Like,
it took him halfway through the book.
So this is just a question about you as a team. When you're making decisions, like what moments are good. So there's sort of 2 different things. One is like what moments are going to be funny, and what moments are you going to take your readers down a more difficult path. And then the other sort of side of that is pacing, because everyone who talks about this book talks about how brilliantly paced it is. It moves really, really quickly. It's you have to turn the page to sort of see what happens next. I think a lot because your perspective changes, which keeps the reader on their toes, But how do you guys make these decisions as a team? Because to me, that's just fascinating.
Well, so I think
you can start with how do you work together?
Okay, well, I think to understand how we write together as a team kind of explains some of it. That so because there are 2 of us, by definition, we're plotters, where we're plotting out every single scene, chapter, so that we understand what's going to happen in the scene, who's in the scene, what's the goal, what's the setback, so where does it start, where does it end?
Are you plotters by nature yourselves, or do you think you just know as a duo that regardless of how your brains work, you just need to do it this way because it's kind of essential when you're working in partnership?
I think we're plotters.
We're plotters.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. Are you a plotter?
Yeah, what are you?
What are you?
Seat in my pants.
Oh, you are?
I never know what the heck I'm doing. Yeah.
Wow, maybe with time we would get there, but I feel like, especially with this being our debut novel, the idea of not knowing where we were going is kind of
It's
scary,
daunting
right?
because I mean we had so we wrote this pre-pandemic and we wrote it mostly in Tracy's dining room. And we had, the giant stickies with color-coded little sticky notes everywhere, plus a timeline. So we're trying to figure out, what does each character know? When did they know it? When does the reader know something? The structure of the book is broken up into, you're going back and forth.
It's very mind-bending.
It was a lot to keep track of.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So without knowing exactly what we were doing in each scene, it would have been really hard. I think to your question about when we put humor versus, kind of go deeper into emotion, I think that actually came really naturally to us. I mean, we've been friends for 20 years,
Right.
and we have in that time had some really, really low, personal moments where it's been all emotion, crying on the floor, and some highs and everything in between. And through it all, even in some of the lowest moments, we have always found humor. And in fact, sometimes the humor is even more important in those really low times. And just, the backstory on that is that I actually had breast cancer while we were in the middle of our 5-year journey. And we queried from the chemo suite. We had, we had just, and gallows humor was very much, I mean, it was a tough time. I won't kid you, but we managed to kind of get through it with that. So I think it's just a really natural balance for us to think about weaving humor into deep emotion and burying that, because you can't always be funny and you can't always be crying.
Right.
And sometimes you have to just, kind of mesh them. And I think in terms of pacing, I mean, do you want to talk about pacing or do you want me to?
Well, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
On the humor.
Yes.
I mean, we did
Mhm.
approach it. Remember the 80s where we made mixtapes?
Right.
I made a lot of mixtapes in the 80s. Just that idea of like, how do you modulate emotion?
Yeah. Right.
And so on some level, like that was a little bit what was in our minds of it, that mixtape feeling.
Yeah.
That you can't just be all up, you gotta bring it down. You gotta have that different emotion. So that was, all that came in handy.
Yeah. Yeah. And we studied pacing in our favorite authors because neither of us had written a word of fiction before we started on this journey. And so we kind of had to teach ourselves. And so we looked at books where we thought the pacing was terrific, where we always wanted to kind of keep turning the page. And we sort of analyzed, we almost reverse engineered in a way. Why did that make us feel that way? What was that, what was that cliffhanger, and how do you make it so it doesn't feel super contrived, but
Right.
also makes you, so, we weren't sure if it was going to work, honestly. When we wrote the whole book and we'd had a whole plan and we had no idea, and we read it through. I remember the day we read it through for the first time from start to finish, and we sort of looked at each other and we said,
Like, we think it hangs together.
it kind of works.
Right.
Yeah. But it's, it's a leap of faith. I mean,
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And I know you've said before that you have felt at times like usually we say that the headlines are that we take the fiction comes from the head. It's kind of happening the other way around for you guys. You guys had written this book and it was mostly done, and then the news hit about Varsity Blues. So what was that like, first of all, for you guys to sort of find out that this topic that was already your entire book, it was all down, had suddenly become like so timely? And did it change your thinking at all in terms of, because I know the book was already done. So if the audience doesn't know, publishing it takes a while. So like the book is done and it can be anywhere from a year to 2 years to more before the book is actually on a shelf. So did you guys have a party? I mean, because it's a serious topic, but it meant that your book was really quite relevant to the times, which you probably knew already, but that just heightened everything.
It definitely did. I mean, as you said, like when the news broke that morning, we felt like the headlines had been ripped from our manuscript. We were sitting up at the dining room table, and like we couldn't believe it. It was jaw dropping. But at the same time, super validating that, you worry when you're writing, you want to push things because we were trying to write something that was provocative. And you worry, are you pushing it too far? Are people going to think it's a caricature?
Right.
And then this happened, and we looked at each other and we're like, did we push it far enough? Like,
Right.
do we need to, like, did they outdo us?
And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could get Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin to blurb our book? As, the book I wish I'd read before my kids applied to college.
Yeah. It's just so interesting because, people are so eager for their kids to get into the right school because they want to publicly tell the world, my child is going to such and such school. But in order to accomplish that, they have to be so secretive and duplicitous. And so often in your book, you've got situations where one parent thinks that another parent is lying about what their child is going to do, when in fact, the one parent didn't even know what was, So the idea of being really sneaky and secretive, but it's about something that you're hoping will be incredibly public, but your way about it.
Great point. Yeah, we never thought of that before, but it's an excellent point.
Yeah, and that's what I think was so interesting about Varsity Blues is it was a lot of money involved, and in order to really get this one big thing that these parents wanted, but it can't come out. It can't, you have to be so quiet about it. And yeah, that's what I thought was so interesting about sort of the behavior of a lot of the moms and the behavior of the kids, is that the moms are like, don't tell people this and don't tell people this. And the kids are just telling each other everything for the most part. They're not following those rules at all.
Right.
I remember at one point, one of the moms is saying, I can't believe my daughter told everybody such and such piece of information. I don't want to give it away. Right. But yeah, I thought that was just really fascinating. Did you feel, and do you feel that often the kids handle that pressure better than we parents do? Or, because we talked about perspective, like keeping your perspective, what's important and what's not really so important. And I just wonder if in your experience of sort of immersing yourself in this world, if you sort of came to the conclusion that kids are in some ways better able to keep perspective, even though they're younger and don't have the life experience?
I think they are, because I think so much of it comes down to ego, right? And they are not as invested they don't have a lifetime of thinking about, this school or that school as the pinnacle of success, right? And I think they are, so I do think they have much more kind of perspective, and they have friends from all different, who are kind of aiming for all different things in their lives. And I think a lot, there might be the kid who wants to go to music school, and there might be the kid who wants, and these are all their friends, right? And so they're not locked into sort of these paradigms that I think a lot of parents
right
become really rigid about.
Right.
But I would add to that but they still feel the pressure. They do. And the expectation that is coming from home. And I think that's what's really unfortunate, is that they're hearing one thing at school, because I think probably most schools do a great job of trying to manage the pressure and talking about trying to find the right fit, and that college is what you make of it. And then they come home and they feel all this pressure of is my choice good enough? Am I good enough? And I think it puts them in a really awful spot.
And meanwhile, the schools are in an awful spot because they want to be able to have a high success rate of placing their kids. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what they do a lot of is, managing expectations of the families and of the kids. But then a lot of families, I think, read that as discouragement. They read manage your expectations, I remember one school I heard of, you say this is a reach, this is a safety, this is a reach. And one school started saying that this is a double reach, this is a triple reach. Now this for you would be a quadruple reach. It's going to be maybe I shouldn't be applying to that school.
Wow, that's right.
I thought quadruple reach was kind of hilarious. Yeah. That's out of reach, in other words.
Yeah, right. But another way of saying it.
Right. But yet the schools don't want to say. I think the schools are under pressure of not wanting to say to parents, no, that's out of reach, that shouldn't be on your kid's list. So they make up, you know,
And they
quadrants.
also don't want to say, oh yeah, he's going to get into his top choice, because they don't want to do that either, because then they set everybody. I think everyone ends up in a really difficult situation, and I think you just capture that incredibly well. So tell us a little bit more background about the two of you, and what do you see in your future together?
Well, we definitely see more books because we're having so much fun. It's been great. And we're already in the middle of our second novel.
Yeah.
And although the last month has been very busy with all the launch events, so we've taken a break from writing, but we look forward to getting back to that.
Do you have a highlight of your debut launch? Has anything that was especially wonderful was it like seeing the books for the first time, or anything that has surprised you or just delighted you?
God, there's so many things.
Honestly, I mean, when just a minute ago, when Amanda introduced us and said these three wonderful authors, honestly, just hearing the word author attached to our names just feels kind of unbelievable.
It's surreal.
I'm still not over that either.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Just books in bookstores, I'm still not over that. Like, I walk into a bookstore, you see it's like, what? I don't think I'll ever quite get over that thrill.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then I think just having people we don't know now starting to read the book and seeing it out in the wild is really
it is wild.
Yeah.
Because you know that for so long a book lives in your head and your heart.
Yeah.
And for us and then with your agent and then with your editor, and it's years in the making. And then it's out in the world, and people like that you don't know, or you wouldn't expect, write to you and tell you, like, you made me feel things, you made me laugh, you made me cry. And this idea that we came up with this story in this world that people spent time with and took the time to do that, to share their thoughts with us and to experience emotion. We really set out to do that, and it's kind of wild that we did.
Yeah. So you're working on the next book, which is really exciting. There's one other thing that we sort of have in common, which is that we're all women who came to writing a little bit later, not our first career. And I'm sure there are, aspiring authors in the audience. Do you guys have any sort of thoughts or advice or things that you would say to people who feel they have a story in them, but don't know what to do with that feeling?
Right. I mean, one thing I would say is that when we first started and we talked about doing this fiction journey, and without any background, we didn't really believe in ourselves at first, because we thought we don't have an MFA and we haven't taken classes. And there was a point where we sort of looked at each other and said, maybe we just need to push pause and go back to school and learn. And I remembered that a friend of mine years ago had said that women, for some reason, always think that they need a certificate, another couple letters after their name, more training, more degrees. And it's just simply not true in a lot of situations. And so I think particularly, we were in our late 40s when we decided to do this, and we didn't feel like we had that much time. We didn't want to take 5 years to go back to school and start, right? And so we just decided finally, but it took some soul searching to dive in. And if I could help someone else short circuit that, those months or weeks or months or years of self-doubt, and just say, do it, you have what it takes, just jump in, research, treat it like a job. That's what I would say is believe it.
Treat it like a job, because really at the end of the day, it's work. It's just it's work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's way more work. I don't know if you guys find that. It is way more work than I realized. I think because good fiction is so effortless looking, it appears so effortless. And I think that's where all the work goes, is making the reader feel confident and comfortable and get lost in the story, so they're not thinking about how was this thing built. But It is
Oh.
hard.
It is a lot of work, definitely.
Hello,
Writing
Amanda.
is work? Aren't you just sitting at the window drinking tea and staring off into the distance?
I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really, and I think what's so fun in your debut year is sort of learning about that process and about how many times the book comes back to you with corrections and you're like, it can't have another typo in it. There's no way.
Right.
No way.
Well, I will say you make it look effortless, Amy. So.
Oh, well, that's what I think you guys did here. I just really, congratulations again. It's so good. I really hope everybody buys not just one copy, but 3 copies for all of your friends who are parents or not parents, but who have nieces or nephews or anybody who's not even just going through the college process, but anyone who's just going through a situation that is full of pressure and where ego is involved, like you said. And it's a great read. Do we have questions, Amanda?
We do. And I want to mention before we go on, this is a thriller, right?
It is. I mean, yeah, I mean, so I was telling you, there's a lot of humor in the book. There's a lot of heartache in the book, but there's absolutely a domestic thriller feel to it as well. And it's hard always to talk about these things without giving things away. Is it a spoiler if we say sort of what the premise is with the initial? I don't want to give anything away.
No, I don't think so.
No, I mean, there's an attempted, what appears to be maybe an attempted murder of one of the girls right before applications are due at Stanford.
Right. And so there is a mystery suspense, thriller component that tracks all the way through.
It carries, what I was about to say, is that piece of it carries through all the way, because you don't know until quite, and there are police involved in this story.
Right.
There are laws broken left and right.
Yeah.
Really left and right, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because there's another whole storyline in here that I think I can say without giving anything away, but DNA features heavily in this book.
Ooh.
And there's a lot of suspense, a lot of stuff that you have to kind of get to the end to sort of get a very satisfying conclusion.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that because we have a lot of lovers of thrillers and suspense, and then with these added very real elements of things that are in the news, it just sounds like a winning combo.
Yeah.
We have a question from Susan Amanoff. Hi, Tracy and Wendy.
Hi, Susan.
Please define the college industrial complex.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. You want to do
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So what we think of as the college industrial complex are all of the businesses and let's call them opportunities that wrap around going to college. So there's standardized testing, tutoring, the whole college visit system, athletic recruiting, all those summer opportunities, leadership opportunities, AP classes, all the different application types. I mean, it's all of those things that are
right. And it also involves college rankings and colleges reaching out to try and game the rankings, because they all want to increase their selectivity index. And the way that they do that is by getting from the College Board or from ACT all of the scores of kids as they start kind of working their way through the testing pipeline. And then they start sending your kids and to your home, emails and snail mail, trying to encourage your kids to apply to their school, primarily so they can reject you. Because the more people who apply, the more they can reject, and then their selectivity rating goes up, and then they make it higher on the top 10 list or the top 20 list or the top 100, whatever you want to be. So there's a lot of different it's a whole ecosystem, and a lot of it we feel is really designed to kind of prey on parents and make them more anxious. And of course that doesn't excuse the conduct of the parents, but you can't talk about this issue without acknowledging that exists.
And it ends up being really linked to finances too, right? Because if you don't pay for this tutor, the SAT isn't going to hit this level, and that, right? I mean, so money is so wrapped up.
Oh, absolutely.
Then
Absolutely.
there are those $75 insignia sweatshirts too.
The whole closet full of
Yeah.
them.
Bills to, like, throw in your closet and hide them.
Yikes. No pressure, kids. Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time for me, but I still remember the tyranny of those testing organizations, and how terrifying it was to think about how much pressure they have, how much power they have over someone's future.
Right.
And
Yeah, and the kids just drown in it. I remember asking one of my kids, did you, like, I sent him an email about something, and he's, I didn't see it. And how can you not, do you not check your email? And he said, Mom, you don't understand. I mean, we are drowning in emails from colleges. It was something he actually showed me, and it was like hundreds of emails, that were unsolicited to their school accounts. And it's crazy.
Do you guys think there will be some changes? Like, I sometimes hear that some of the schools are dropping testing. And I mean, do you think between books like yours and this Big Varsity Blues scandals that some of the colleges are doing a little more reflection on their process? Or is it just, are we just too far gone?
I would like to think yes, but I don't know. I think a lot of it is really, it's the colleges are incentivized by money. Everyone's incentivized by money, right? And
Right.
And unless we can figure out a way to level that playing field somehow, I don't know that it's going to be more than lip service given. But we can always hope. I don't know. That's just, and again, we don't consider ourselves activists in this sense. We just wanted to kind of, as artists, sort of shine a light on what was going on and provoke conversation. So, but we'll leave it to the book clubs to discuss that, because there are a lot of juicy issues with that.
For sure.
Another wonderful author, Susie Orman-Schnall, is here.
Hi, Susie.
She says, "Hi, ladies. Excited to be here on page 67 and loving the book." She would like some further clarification. I loved the conversation around co-writing and how that works, and how Wendy and Tracy are plotters, and obviously Amy might have hated group projects in school just as much as I did, because I think the fly by the seat of their pantsers are those kinds of people. But Susie wanted to ask, what is your actual process for writing together? Do you alternate chapters? Does one of you type? How did you figure out how to co-write?
You want to start? I'll start. So, yeah, she just stands behind me and
Type faster.
Take this down and get me a latte.
Right, exactly. So some of it, there's a lot of, in the beginning, there's just a lot of brainstorming as we were kind of honing in on the idea. So it's a lot of brainstorming. I start a lot of spreadsheets usually to track these ideas.
Spreadsheet queen.
But once we start to narrow in on the characters, we create pretty much like a character Bible, so that we're both really invested in their background, their origin story, their family, down to like what's on their iPhone, so that either one of us could write a character, but then we split it up, because one of the things we've discovered as co-authors, co-writers, is that first we check our egos, and then we know what our strengths are, and we really work to leverage our strengths. So we'll each take a character from there and breathe life into it. And remember, we've already plotted out every chapter, and then we smush it all together and we edit every single word together.
Right.
Wow.
That's how I do it.
That's the process.
Yeah. But it just.
Amy, what do you think of that?
Yeah. Susie, right. What's Susie's reaction to that?
Susie's a plotter. I know she's a plotter, so I know she'll definitely appreciate that part of it. And she writes beautiful historical fiction, by the way, for those of you who have not read her books. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the figuring out which person has which strength and sort of really playing to that seems incredibly clever, and also something that I think you can do because you were friends first. Like your friendship is helping, I should think, this relation, like this partnership, you know, because you trust each other and you both want the same thing, you want the same results.
Right. And you, Amy, and Susie, like, you all know how hard it is to make cuts and to get, you know, feedback and that sort of thing. And it helps that we have this foundation of friendship when we come together, because you could see a situation in which there would be tension, right? If you come and you're like, here's my chapter, and, you know, this person is doing X, Y, and Z, and you know, the other person looks at it and says, you know, I think maybe the whole middle part of that chapter doesn't really serve the story and isn't really moving it forward. And it's hard enough to do that with your own work, but to then also, you know, kind of suggest it to your partner and to like trust that your partner is going to take that in the, you know, manner that you're intending it for, like the greater good, is that is a real gift that we have, because we go so far back.
Susie said, I could never do it. Well, what I mean is, like, I could never co-write, but yes, I can, and I can and do plot.
Yes.
And she thanks Amy for her kind words, and has a follow-up question. Is there a story behind the title? Was it your idea? Was it the publisher's idea?
It was our publisher. We pitched it, or we sold it with a different title.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the publisher changed it, and we love it. They did a great job.
But it is.
Can we hear what the title was?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Our original title was called Do Not Admit.
Ooh.
I actually read Do Not Admit.
Oh.
So I was really confused later. I was lucky enough that I got a very, very early read of this book. So I actually was in on Do Not Admit before it became Girls with Bright Futures, which I think works beautifully for it. I mean,
it does. And it's actually a line from the book. So I think it's like one of the moms.
I don't remember the line. Don't remember. Oh, because I read it as Do Not Admit, so I wasn't looking for the.
Right, you weren't looking for it, but it's in there. So we love it. We think it was a great move.
Yeah.
I never get tired of that moment when you stumble across the title in the book and you're like, oh, I made it. I found it. I found the Easter egg.
Exactly. We left the Easter egg and we didn't even know it.
Speaking of Easter eggs, I really loved your discussion around dark humor and how we modulate emotion, and your mention of the 80s mixtape. It makes me wonder, more and more authors are doing this. If you had a mixtape around the book or a playlist, are there any certain songs you would include?
Oh, we have one.
We have one on our website.
Really?
Yeah, so on our website, dobmeierkatzman.com, we have a book club event guide. And we have a Spotify playlist for book clubs. Oh
my gosh.
Yeah, there's some funny ones like Under Pressure,
right?
By Billy Joel.
I'm winning by Santana. Cyndi Lauper, True Colors.
Wow.
Foreigner, Final Countdown.
Oh no.
Journey, Don't Stop Believin'. We had a really good time putting the Spotify playlist together.
Oh, so good. I miss karaoke so much. I'm going to put your website here in the comments for everyone.
Thank you.
And speaking of the internet and social media, this is something we ask everyone as we're kind of winding down. What's the best way to follow you, Wendy and Tracy, on social media?
So you'll find us on Instagram and Twitter, and our handle is @KatzNDobs, KatzNDobs.
Okay.
We just started that as a play on words because we're from Seattle and it rains cats and dogs, and Wendy always had a cat and I always had a dog, but then Wendy got a pandemic puppy and it like messed everything up.
Oh no.
But we're keeping our name.
So if people are wanting to support Warwick's and they're going to buy several copies of your books, is there anything on your TBR or something that you guys have read lately that just thrilled you or that you think people should throw in their shopping carts while they're buying your book?
Well, so this is a book that came out yesterday. And so if you like Girls with Bright Futures, this is called Guilty Admission by Nicole Laporte. And Nicole's going to be at Warwick's next week.
Okay.
And this is a nonfiction book that takes a look at really what happened in LA with Operation Varsity Blues. And we started.
It's a companion book to yours.
Yeah, it is a companion book to ours. Exactly. It is juicy and fun.
Yeah.
So,
She's an investigative reporter, and we've connected with her over the last couple weeks because this came on our radar screen, and so we've had some fun back and forth. We hope to do something with Nicole at some point because it's very much like the fiction, nonfiction kind of very similar stories.
yes.
So there's that, and then on the fiction side, I read Black Buck recently by Matteo Escarapour, and I thought that was just fantastic. And what are you reading now?
Well,
yeah.
I'll get to what I'm reading, but I would say Musical Chairs. I read it
of course
in the pandemic, and it was delightful. And Amy's a beautiful writer, and this was a really fun book. We enjoyed that a lot.
Charming.
Thank you.
And then another debut novelist, The Kindest Lie by Nancy Johnson. So I just started this, and so I was like hooked in the first sentence. But she's a fellow 2021 debut novelist, so we recommend this one.
Fantastic.
And let's see, one more. Well, another one of my favorite ones that we both read recently was The Last Flight by Julie Clark.
Yes.
Great psychological thriller about two women who had the chance to, after a chance encounter, trade places and escape their lives. It was.
And her first book was wonderful too. And I actually thought of it when I was reading your book, The Ones We Choose, her first book, because of that theme of DNA sort of featuring heavily into the plot of a book.
Right, I heard about that. I haven't gone back and read her first book, but I want to, especially having read The Last Flight. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it kept the pages turning.
Yeah,
Ooh,
that was great.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you guys booksellers in a past life?
We love to read.
We love to read. Yeah.
And I have to say another really amazing book, the one I'm actually listening to with Libro FM, where you can download a book and it goes to support local bookstores. A Swim in a Pond in the Rain.
Mm-hmm.
George Saunders, who writes just beautiful short stories. But honestly, for anyone who loves to read, but if you have any thoughts at all that you would like to write or be a better writer or keep writing or whatever, he takes Russian short stories, and it's a class. It's like going back to college. I'm having the best time listening to it because he's the one narrating it. So I'm listening to him. And he takes short stories and then literally takes them apart and walks you through page by page to help you understand how it's constructed. How are the characters developed? How do you know what you know by page 3? What has that set you up for expectation-wise as you continue with the story? I'm learning so much. I feel like I'm back in college, speaking of college admissions, and I didn't even have to apply to get in. I just had to go. And it's wonderful. It looks like that. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Warwick's carries it, and it's just brilliant. And it's so good, in fact, that I bought it also because I want to like underline and highlight. Like that's how much I'm enjoying.
Great, it is on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he narrates it himself, I think, for Libro FM.
He does. So you feel like you're sitting in class with him, and he has a lovely voice. He has a lovely, kind voice, and I'm a little in love with my professor, I think is what I'm saying. He's really, really, he's a great writer, but he's a really good narrator, and you do just feel like you're sitting in the dimmed classroom, listening hear about Russian short stories. It's great. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I guess he's been teaching that course for 20 years now, and hundreds of people apply every year, and maybe 5 or 6 are admitted.
Yeah, it's really hard to get into I guess it's the MFA program at Syracuse University. And he says that some of the most satisfying, happy times of his life have been when he's teaching this class. So he decided to put it into a book that we can all enjoy. So
What a gift.
yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you for plugging Libro FM for us too. They're a really fantastic partner to independent bookstores, and they have all the same great audiobooks you can get elsewhere, and they give us a little bit of a cut, and it's great. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
And Amy, how do we follow you on social media?
I am at Amy Poeppel across the board. I have a weird enough last name that there are no others. So it's Amy Poeppel, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, although not as often as I used to be, but heavy on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook, and I love also, but it's just how much time do we all have? I'm in draft writing mode right now, so I'm a little crazed, as you guys well understand. I know you do.
Well, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to
support us with this. My pleasure. Nothing I love more.
Amy's just been a lovely author, welcoming us into the author community and taking time answering our questions. It's been a gift, and we
you are grateful. Sweet. When I have to say, the writing community, especially the women's writing community, which, like you guys, I came to this very late. It was just so thrilling to find out that there's this amazing group of women who are so supportive of each other. It's the opposite of this college scary thing. It's this wonderful adult alternative, which is try boosting people up and try supporting people. It's been a real pleasure in a job where you can feel very alone a lot of the time, to find out that there's this world of writers out there who are generous and lovely and brilliant. So that's been a real bonus for me later in life to kind of come across that, including meeting the two of you. So
thank you.
Look forward to a day when we can all do it in person and not in these little boxes on our computers.
I can't wait. I want to drink wine in bookstores in those little plastic cups. It's not even cold. It's like lukewarm white wine. I can't wait. I just want to be at a bookstore event in person. So we will do this. We will do this.
Great.
For the next book, we will all go to La Jolla and celebrate in person.
It's a date.
Yeah.
I would cheerfully clean up those lipstick stained plastic wine glasses to be able to be with all the book people. But this has been really good. So thank you, all of you. And again, the links for books are in the comments, and thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. This was a really fantastic event.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Warwick. Thank you, Amy.
All right, so with that, goodbye, Facebook. Thanks for joining us. And I will take us off recording.